Welcome to About That Bible with Every Nation NYC. We are here to help you get more out of that Bible. We are reading a plan at the moment, and you will find that plan in the notes if you want to follow along too. And we're going to discuss different bits as we read along. You can also follow us on Instagram or Twitter at About That Bible, or go to our website, everynationyc.org, for all our podcasts there. But without further ado, let's talk about that Bible. My name is Ailsa. This is Nathan. We're going to talk Job.
All right.
I feel like every time we come to talk about a book of the Bible, it's always like, oh my goodness, this is a crazy one. But here we are again.
This one's definitely
Job.
no exception. It's a beast.
Yeah, it's Job. True confession, until very recently, and actually until we did this plan, I don't think I had read the whole of Job.
Okay.
Because it had always been like, Job, this is like really like depressing and meaty, and I'd put it off. So here we are.
I definitely don't blame you. I think I've only read it in its entirety now, like twice, maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
It's not like the most uplifting thing, is it?
No. And that's why we're going to talk about the main point of Job, and it's not a hugely uplifting topic, but here we go. So, I think Job is talking about whether the world works in a just way and whether God is just.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start by summarizing Job, and then we can come back to whether God is just. You know, that really small question.
Oh, yeah.
Let's summarize it first.
I mean, the simple answer is yes, right?
I think what we like to call
Podcast
that
done.
trite.
Podcast done.
Simple and trite. Let's try and summarize Job
Okay.
first so that we know what we're talking about. Because what is Job? What's going on?
It's it's an immense book. It's 40 some odd chapters long.
Yeah.
If not longer. And basically we open and God is holding court in heaven. God is surrounded by other spiritual beings.
Which you do not get very often in the Bible, I should add.
So yeah, you have this heavenly scene.
It's like a
right?
God chat. Yeah.
We don't know who's seeing this. We don't know who's narrating this, but there he is.
Chat.
And out of the midst comes Satan and says, or actually no, God says, how does that start?
Well, I think he's like, oh, look at Job.
God's just bragging on Job.
I think so. And then like Satan's like, he's only like good because he wants things from you.
In any case, either God or Satan raises the subject matter of Job.
Yeah.
And Satan's like, exactly. He's only serving you because you're so good to him, God.
Yeah. And then we move on to, then Satan's like, how about I prove to you that I'm right? God's like, how about I prove to you that I'm right? And then God's like, okay, you can go test Job.
Yeah.
Basically. And then Job has like a terrible time.
Just his life goes totally sideways.
Terrible.
He, up until that point, he'd been a very righteous person. He'd served God. He'd made sacrifices on behalf of his children in case that they got up to a little mischief while they were partying. And I love like how teenagers, in ancient Hebrew culture,
They were also being teenagers.
Yeah, it's basically the same. And so Job's praying for them. He's praying for his wife. He's working hard. He's living for God as best he can. And then everything starts collapsing around him. Literally, like I think a house falls on his children. His animals
Lots of people
die.
come and like take away all these different kinds of animals. I think there's like different people coming. Irrelevant, but I just think it's funny.
There's all sorts of
It's not funny, obviously, but you know what I mean.
calamities and disasters, and only one person survives, and it's just the messenger. And he comes and says, Job, awful news.
All this stuff.
Everybody's died. All your sheep have died. All your camels have died.
Yeah.
Messenger after messenger.
Yeah. And then his friends pop up.
He's
right?
got 3 friends.
3 friends. They pop up. They're like so good at the beginning. They're like, hey, we're just going to sit with you because you're like suffering terrible
They just
things.
sit in silence, don't they?
I was like, I'm going to write that down. That's good. And then they start doing that. Then it starts being like this back and forth, right? So one friend will talk for a bit and then Job will answer. Next friend, Job answers. And it does that for
I think there's 3 cycles of that.
a lot of chapters.
Yes. And then a 4th friend turns up out of nowhere. Elihu, something like that.
He pops up.
And he's young and he's brash and he and he gets the job done, and he disagrees with Job, and he disagrees with their friends, but he honors God.
Yeah.
He lifts God up. He has a very high view of God. And what's tempting while we're reading Job, and what's hard, is that like each person is just bringing their perspective.
Yeah.
Each person is true, but it's not kind of universally true. So like his friends are saying, well, you must have done something wrong. And as you're reading it, you're like, yeah, Job has certainly done something wrong.
I always think that. Sure.
Yeah. Like there's no way
He's
that
a
you're
human.
perfect, right?
Yeah.
And then Job's like, no, I've done nothing wrong. And then Elihu comes and it's just like, who do you trust? Who do you believe through the whole thing?
Yeah.
And
I'm not sure.
You don't really have any clarity
No.
through most of the book until finally in some of the last chapters, God turns up.
Yeah.
And boy, does he ever turn up. He comes in a whirlwind and basically tells Job, stand up, dress like a man. I think he says that, like, dress yourself like a man.
I don't know what it means.
I don't
In
know.
that point, put a dress on. Right?
Probably. Oh, yeah.
Moving on.
And God just lets him have it. He's like, you're not God, I am. And where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Where were you when I made it snow, when I made it rain? Have you seen the heavenly storehouses, filled with snow? Have you seen these mountaintops? Have you seen the depths of the ocean? Were you there in deep dark space when I did this and that? You're like, and Job is just dumbfounded. There's nothing to say. He's done.
He's done. God has the last word, and then he basically gives him double back.
Yep.
At the end.
Yeah.
Which is another hard bit.
Only after rebuking his friends. He's like,
yes.
You guys, you treated Job wrong. The three friends. Elihu never gets another mention, as far as I can remember.
I don't think so.
And then God says, Job, you need to pray for your friends.
Yeah.
And so that they can be restored as well.
So, thinking about those friends, because the most of Job is about the friends. What did they tell us about whether God is just or whether we're seeing an unjust God? Whatever.
His friends have a very simplistic view of the world.
Yeah.
It's very black and white. Either God is good, and therefore God rewards good people, or because you're doing so poorly in life, surely you've done something wrong. God's just, you're doing bad, so you must be the bad guy. It's a very, very black and white worldview. And I think that, like, if we ever say, like I did at the start of this video, yeah, God's just. Like, I've got all the answers.
Yeah, you're just being like that.
No, I want to clarify that. God is just, right? Like, I thoroughly believe that. But when I stand up and say, I have all the answers, I've got, like, the worldview that's going to solve everything, pull everything together, what it does is it basically turns you into a judgmental person.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to these friends, is they become very judgmental. They start making up stuff like, surely you've tortured widows, or you've robbed widows. Surely you've done this. Surely you've not fed the people that are in need that come to you. Surely you've turned them away empty-handed, or something. Like, they just make up these horrible accusations.
Trying to work out what Job's been doing wrong to make sense, which we still do, right? We still like to think, oh well, this is happening to someone, they're suffering in this way. We like to think we're more sophisticated than this, but we like victim blame, right?
Oh yeah,
they are like classic victim blamers.
That's exactly what's happening here.
The thing I find interesting though is that so at the end, and you did mention this, God is like so ticked off at them, and they've actually stood up. They have stood up and said, God is just, like, Job, you must be wrong. Which, we're saying, oh, that's not very nice, that's judgmental. But, like, they seem like they're on the side of God. But then, like, he's really ticked off at them. Like, Job basically has to, like,
That's a great point. Yeah.
What are we supposed to do with that? Like, they seem
Well, don't be
pro-God.
judgmental, religious. Yeah? Like, oh, I've got access to God, therefore you're doing bad, you must be doing wrong.
Yeah.
God is more ticked off, and that's like a theme in the Bible. Jesus to the Pharisees, Paul to the Galatians.
It's not like an original to Job moment.
I mean, yeah, it's early in, well, I don't know. We can talk about history about when it was written, but yeah, it's a theme throughout all of the Bible, isn't it?
Yeah.
God does not like religious bigotry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, they just think they're doing the right thing though. The fourth friend, he also believes God is just though.
Mm-hmm.
But it is different.
Yeah, I don't think he pins it on, he doesn't pin it on Job.
No. I think he's a bit annoyed at Job. I think maybe he's annoyed at Job for how he blames God at one point, I think.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
God doesn't get mad at Elihu.
No,
The fourth
I don't
friend.
think so. That's the other thing. Like, we see with Job, we see someone who does get annoyed at God. Like, God is not annoyed at Job in the end. That's actually interesting. He's annoyed at those friends. He's not annoyed at Job.
Mm-hmm.
Job has accused God of being possibly, like, unjust.
Yeah. So Job has just brought his emotions to God.
Yeah.
After going back and forth with his friends, he's like, "That's it. I want to talk to God. I want Him to prove Himself to me." And I think that's something that like King David does. He brings all of his emotions to God. It's something that Job does, and I think that God understands. Like, this world is tough, and we want to see where He is and what He's doing. But on the other hand, he's also a lot bigger than we can understand and fathom, and so we don't always get the answers that we're looking for.
No, I don't think you get any of the answers. So, like, you're left, you read Job, and you think, okay, so why is this dude suffering?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, you're kind of given the answer at the beginning, right? You've got, like, God and Satan having a chat. And you know the reason that Job is suffering in this instance is because Satan sort of thought that he should have a go at him. And God was like, okay. So you see that, but there's no real reason outside of that. And Job never knows. Like, he never gets the answer, right?
No, he doesn't. And he doesn't get an explanation for why he gets everything back. There's never even an attempt at a reason in the scripture.
It's not even bothering to answer that, right?
No.
And the God and Satan bit is, like, very unsatisfactory.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's the point, right? It's supposed to be unsatisfactory because...
That's terrible, though. We hate
well,
that.
like, yeah, but, like, bad stuff
we.
happens,
Yeah.
and we never get the answer in life. And so that's what Job is basically opening up, is like, the world is not black and white. Good stuff happens to bad people, bad stuff happens to good people. But that does not make God unjust.
Oh, man. Okay.
All right, so we are right now reading through the Bible chronologically. And so it appears halfway, kind of like after Genesis 11, you go to Job. What we've seen is that there's this Satan character running around, as a snake. And then in Genesis 3, God limits his authority in some way. Like, he says, "Cursed are you, you're going to be on your belly, eat the dust of the earth."
Yeah.
That God in some way limits Satan's authority. And Satan doesn't like this. And so in Job, what I see is Satan saying, "Yeah, of course people still like you, God. You've taken away what I'm allowed to do with them." And it's like if you've ever been using an umbrella on a rainy day and you're like, has the rain stopped? How bad is it out there? You pull it back. What hits Job is like a welter of just a torrential downpour of rain. Like, yeah, Satan's still at large. He's still a bad guy, but God has got him like on lockdown. So he's still able to, go around and do his accusing thing and his lying thing, but he's not going to just like drop a house on your kids.
Yeah.
It's kind of like...
Okay, that makes sense. So you've got the limiting of Satan in that first bit of Genesis, and then you see how that actually plays out.
So that's the way I see it.
Job.
Yeah, as we read it chronologically, that's what I see happening.
Rather than it being like God is punishing Job.
Yes.
He just takes his thing away.
His grace. So like grace is something that we don't deserve. We never earn or deserve God's grace, and so God is constantly, I believe, extending grace to every being on earth, making our life better than what we deserve.
Yeah.
All the time. And here in Job, we see a sneak peek of what it could be like if God did not limit the evil powers of this world.
Yeah.
So that's what I see when I read it chronologically.
Yeah. And where it does it normally, what do we learn about the book from where it normally says in our Bible?
Normally it sits with the wisdom literature. And you get Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. And I love the work that the Bible Project did on this, kind of explaining the evolution of wisdom literature. They build one on top of the other. And so Proverbs has this very simplistic kind of black and white view of the world. If you do good, good stuff is going to happen to you. If you do bad, if you sleep in and you don't work, then you're gonna be poor.
Yeah.
And that's mostly true, but there's always the exceptions. And then Ecclesiastes comes along and says, the wicked prosper. What's the point of life? And it kind of tears up the groundwork of Proverbs, and then Job comes along and says, "Yeah, that's all true, but you know what? God's still just. He sits on his throne. His wisdom is way beyond our wisdom, and we've got to trust him, whether we like it or not." And that's like really, really hard.
Yeah.
I think the authors knew that from the very start. And that's why Job struggles with it. That's why his 3 black and white friends struggle with it. Elihu never really even gets his head around it.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
At least we see represented people struggling with it, though.
Yeah.
It's okay to like really struggle with it.
The nature of sin, and like I'm thinking Adam and Eve fell, and what they did was they said, we're not going to trust you as God. We're going to take our trust from you and pull it inward. All of a sudden, the universal center of right and wrong is going to rest here. And so when bad things happen to me, I'm going to say, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And God's saying, no, the world's quite messed up now. And so to accomplish ultimate good, you're going to think that it's wrong. It's your little world is going to experience something that does not feel good for you in the moment. And so
That's, like,
God is
super
asking for
hard.
us to expand our world and allow our world to be bigger than us in our suffering.
Ooh, it's like such a hard one to like read. This is why people are like, ooh, Job.
Yeah, so Job is super uplifting. But I believe it is, because bad stuff is happening. But what Job is saying is that there's reason, there's point, that God is still in control. And that, Romans chapter 8. And we banded about quite a lot, or can be banded about, and I don't want to just use it tritely, but I believe it points in, it funnels into Job here. All things work together for good for those who love God, and love God and are called according to his purposes. God's working stuff for good.
But on a much bigger scale than we comprehend, basically.
Yes. It does not mean that at the end of your life, on your deathbed, God's going to like turn up and be like, well, here's why. Your cat died when you were 3. Your granny died when you were 7. Your father left you when you were 12. He's not going to do that. Sometimes we get glimpses of that in the world, and most of the time, no. I believe like when you walk with God, you do get the narrative kind of unfolding.
Do you mean like you do understand more of why things happen?
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yes, but you got to hold on for a long, long time.
Yeah, and it's not also like for like you don't get to see like, oh, you sin, this happens, or you're like good, this happens. Like it's more
your cat dies at 3 so that you can go into veterinary school and solve cat AIDS,
or not even that, if you're a good person, then you get good blessing.
Yeah.
Or you follow God and then you get a good thing. Like what Satan accuses Job at the beginning of only doing it for what he can get out of God.
Yeah. So we've got to follow God because he's God.
Yeah. It kind of seems like that, because that's kind of what it says on the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
God's like, I am God and bigger than any of your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He deserves it. He's God and we're not, even though our heart cries out, yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Yeah, no. We're like, but surely I understand. And Job's
I've
like,
got
you
enough
don't
wisdom."
understand.
And that's Job.
Yeah, we get to see a man wrestling with just not understanding.
Yes.
Yeah. And he gets all the stuff back at the end, but it's not because he was good, right? I think God makes that clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's just grace on the end.
It's just grace. There's all sorts of little droplets of grace all the way through Job. Job keeps referencing and alluding to these incredible Christological foreshadowing pieces.
What do you mean by Christological foreshadowing pieces?
Yes.
Because that's a whole bunch of like terms.
Job keeps using these phrases that the only answer to these phrases is Jesus. The only way that this is ever going to be solved is Jesus. So at one point he's like, I wish that I had an advocate who could place his hand on God and place his hand on me. I'm like, well, who's going to touch heaven and earth at the same time? Jesus. Another point he says, for I know my Redeemer lives and shall stand upon the earth. Who's this Redeemer who's going to stand on the earth? Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And then ultimately, the way that Job suffers, everything around him dies. He's basically died, like everything, to the world, to his wife, to his kids, to everything to him is dead.
Yeah.
And then God says, this is the guy that's going to restore these self-righteous friends back to God. And even Job himself is a little bit like a Christ figure.
Yeah, because he keeps standing in the gap for these people.
He stands in the gap for his friends. That's right. For his kids at first.
Yeah, for his kids on the front end and then for his friends on the back end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's all about Jesus.
It is all about Jesus. Or you can read it.
All about Jesus.
I think Jesus read it all about Jesus.
Probably. Still, but I think we're still left. It's all about Jesus, but we're still left with it. It's okay to be grappling with this stuff. It's okay to not be.
It's a lifelong struggle. It really is. And for somebody who's struggling, it's just, you kind of have to hold on. Just keep going. Trusting that God is good. Trusting that your Redeemer lives, has stood upon the earth.
Yeah.
That God is crushing suffering and will one day fully and finally make it right.
Yeah. And on that note, Job,
it's a struggle.
It's a struggle.
The struggle is real.
It's an important one, though, because the struggle is real in real life. Job, don't want to say done, because that's not Job done. Done.
Job, the conversation is opened.
Yeah.
We're finished opening the conversation.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And Job, we're finished opening your conversation. And done.
Moving on.
That was About That Bible with Every Nation NYC. You can follow along the same reading plan as us, and you'll find the link for that in the notes. And you can read too. Don't forget, you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at About That Bible, and you can find all our podcasts at everynationnyc.org or all the places that you can find podcasts. See you later, guys.